So in this lecture, we're going to take a look at Array Mesh. Array Mesh is a new tool in ZBrush 4R7 that allows you to duplicate objects in an array inside of ZBrush. This allows you to take really simple geometry like what you see here. This was created using ZModeler, and create infinitely more complicated shapes and forms from that beginning building block. So to show how we work this out, we just go to the Tool menu, open up Array Mesh. Now, just like with Fiber Mesh, there's a lightbox set of presets here. And one of the best ways to learn about this is to go explore these presets and see how these shapes have been created. We're not going to rely on these for this demo, but I just wanted to point these out so you can come and look at these as well to sort of supplement your experience with Array Mesh. Also, if you're just trying to make a spiral or a circle or a set of quad-like tires here, you can actually pull up these presets and have it do that for you. But we want to learn how to set this up manually, so we're going to come down here and turn on Array Mesh. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enable transpose mode. That allows me to move the piece around and set my distance of duplicates simply by using transpose. So I'm going to use the transpose move line, and you'll notice this now has a repeat section and a stage section. This just lets me know that I'm in stage 1 with 2 repeats. So I'm going to move this piece off. Now I can click in repeats and drag to increase my number, and you'll notice that that's also the same as moving the slider here. So I'll set it to 5 repeats and just continue to move it out. So I can move those 5 repeats apart, just like so. So that is an array of 5 repeats in one stage. Now if I wanted to create a new stage, I can come here and click Append New. Now that has now created a new stage, but it's sitting right on top of the previous one. So what I will do is I will just transpose move this up. By the way, notice that anytime I'm transpose moving, it's the same as making movements down here in these sliders. Just by having transpose on, it allows me to make those changes here. So here I've created a brand new stage, and I can set my repeats. Let's turn those up, and let's move. You see how we're just very quickly generating a wall of this greeble detail. Let's increase those repeats. So here we've very quickly created what could be, a portion of circuit board, a bit of interior structure in a spaceship, some reinforced wall for an environment. It's really any number of different things that you can create from repeating parts you can do using the Array Mesh. Now if I were to Y mirror this, I can actually mirror that in the y-axis. You see I've just now mirrored that across. So now we've seen how to create a basic array that has 2 stages. There's my first stage, there's my second stage. And we're repeating a single object along a plane. Let's take a look now at how we can create something different. Let's create a spiral from this basic building block. So I'm going to go back, load up my basic building block again. That's just mechpart.ztool. Turn on Array Mesh. Turn on Transpose. I am going to come down here. I'm going to go to Rotate. I will rotate it around 360 degrees in the Z-axis. And I will offset it. Oops, I'm still in Rotate. I will offset like so. I will set my repeats. And now to make it a circle, I will come over here and select Pivot. And this yellow dot right here is my pivot point. So if I move that pivot point, here you can see I can make these pieces follow a circular form. So I'm going to turn up my repeats, excuse me, and then transpose that over. I'm going to come to the side view here, and I'm going to offset it up. And now if I want to make these parts connect to each other, I can increase my repeats. I can go to Rotate. I can change my rotations. So change it around the y-axis, change it around the x-axis. You can see how those will affect the end result. If I want to further adjust the pivot point, I can do that just by selecting Pivot. I can move that pivot point around. I'll go back to Offset, and I'm just going to offset move this in a bit, and then increase my repeats. So it's almost like a spiraling staircase. I just want all those parts to attach to each other. I'm going to use offset in the y-axis and just move that up. So I've created a single spiral now. So what I will do is I'm going to create a new stage, and I'm going to mirror that across the x-axis. I will transpose this over, and that creates this very interesting compound object. So I'm going to create a new stage now. I'm going to append new, and I'm going to mirror this in the z-axis and the x-axis. We will transpose this over. There we go. Just the y-axis. That's perfect. And then connect those parts. Now I'll create another stage, and that will be all 4 of these pieces. Watch what happens. I'll create a new stage. I will rotate this. Make sure I'm in rotate mode, and I'm just going to rotate this around the z-axis. So we'll rotate it by, let's say, 90 degrees. And here you can see we're creating a very complicated form just from those individual parts. If I turn off Array Mesh, I can actually see where my original piece is here. Turn Array Mesh back on. If I turn off Transpose, I can come down here with the Move brush. I'll just go to Move, and I can actually manipulate the initial piece of my array and see how that impacts every individual part of the array. So if I zoom in here, maybe I want to pull these points out. Let's turn our draw size down, and let's make these points quite jagged. Let's drag those out. Every instance in the array follows suit. Now if I create another stage, I can now scale this down, and I'll go ahead and use Transpose for scaling this. Scale that down, and then we will rotate it again around, let's say, the z-axis. And there we go, we've further added another layer here. Now if I want to look at my different stages, I can move between them here with this slider. There's stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. I could go in and continue to manipulate each stage. If I wanted to manipulate stage 1, let's say I wanted to adjust it in this axis. I can make that change, and it continues all along the other axes. I can even increase my repeats. So that's quite an intimidating looking shape there. I might incorporate something like that into perhaps some sort of undersea creature, or the drill bit on a fantasy weapon or tool. So anytime you've got a basic building block that you want to duplicate into a more complicated shape, Array Mesh is perfect for that. So let's take a look at another demonstration of Array Mesh now. Let's see how we can use Array Mesh to create the legs and body segments of an insect character. I'm going to create a centipede using just Array Mesh. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now. I'm going to load a new tool here. I'm going to load the Body Segment Z tool and the Centipede Leg Z tool. And these are both available for you to use as well. I'll select Centipede Leg, and here you can see we've just got a basic centipede leg. It was created using Z-spheres. I'm going to go to Array Mesh, turn on Array Mesh. I'm going to set my offset, turn on Transpose, set my offset, and let's give it about 7 repeats. I'll tell you what, let's go a bit higher than that. Let's go to 12. I'll just click and drag that center circle, set my offsets. There we go. Now I want these legs to scale down as we go down the length of the body, so I'm going to go to Scale, and I'm going to scale down those legs. Now unfortunately that makes the line pull away from the center. I want them to actually stay centered on where the body segments are going to be. So I'll just go back to Offset, and I will move, oops, make sure I go to Transpose Move, and I will move them up like this. So the legs will now go from big down to small. So I'm going to duplicate this by appending a new stage, and I'm going to mirror my stage I'll go ahead and mirror this now across the z-axis, and let's go ahead and move those over. And there we go, we've got our set of legs. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to bring in our body segments. So I'm going to go to Subtool, Append, and I'm just going to append in the Body Segment Z tool that we just loaded in. Alt-click on that subtool to select it. Now I just want to position this, and let's go ahead and scale this up. Let's move it up a little bit so the legs don't crash. There we go. Just make a quick change to the body here. I'm just going to pull those faces up over the legs there. Make sure I've got my symmetry turned on for that. You'll notice that we're actually not facing down the x-axis here. So what I'll do is I'll just go to Transform, and I'll turn on Y symmetry. Transform, Y symmetry. Turn on L sim here. Oops. Looks like I actually want Z symmetry. There we go. If I've got L symmetry turned on, that allows me to use local symmetry, which is just for the object that I'm using. It's not based on the world center. There we go. Perfect. So I just made a little few changes to that shape just so it would flow along the top of those legs better. Now I'm going to go to Array Mesh, turn on Array Mesh, turn on Transpose. We've now turned this object into an array mesh. I will use my transpose line to offset, set my repeats to about, let's say, 7. Let's see how that looks. Let's extend that back. Looks like we'll need more than that. Let's go ahead and set 12. There we go, that looks quite nice. Now I want to lower them so they go down along with the legs. There we go. Looks quite nice. Now what I'd like to do is make the shape of the body a little bit more interesting. I want to scale it along the length, but actually non-uniformly. What I mean by that is I'm going to come down here to Scale, and if we were to scale in the Z direction like this, watch what happens. I'm just going to go ahead and scale. Now I'm going to go to my Z profile curve here, and I will change this curve. I'm going to add a point here and pull this down, pull this up. So you see what happens here is we're able to actually scale where the body gets bigger and smaller along the length, just like this. So that's far more interesting than just having the body kind of follow the same sort of path as it moves down, getting smaller and smaller. There we are. Perfect. So now I'd like to actually add a tail. I can create a tail by appending a new stage, but this time when I append my stage, I'm going to turn on chain. What that does is it creates one instance here at the end of the chain. This will allow me now to set my offset, turn up my repeats. I will do my rotation. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my pivot point. So I'm going to grab the pivot, and let's move this out and up like so. I'm going to go to Scale, and let's scale this down. And let's turn down our number of repeats. Let's set it to about 10. There we go. Now as I adjust this pivot point position, I can change the curvature of this bit here. I'm going to go ahead and change my scale here again. Let's scale this down more. Now change my rotation. There we go. And if I rotate like that, I can actually twist the tail, but we'll leave the tail somewhat flat. Now I'm going to go back to pivot point and adjust the pivot point. There we go. Now I'll go to my rotation and adjust my rotation. There we go. So now we've got a segmented body that gets smaller, then wider. Then we've got large tail segments that then get smaller and smaller, getting down towards the tail. If I want to move between my stages, once again, I can just come through here and select the different stages. There's two here. There is the body and then the tail. If I go back to the legs, remember that I can go into Array Mesh, I can turn off Transpose, and then I can continue to manipulate the legs themselves. If I go to my Move Brush, the easiest way to tell where the original one is to turn off Array Mesh, and it'll just show you. So here I can add some more character to these legs. Maybe I want to bring these knuckles up and out, add a bit more of a wicked kind of curvature to these. There we go. Maybe I'll do a little bit of inflating here just on the knuckles. There we go. Now that change propagates all the way through the repetitions of the array. Now before we leave the Array Mesh chapter completely, there's one more thing that I want to bring up. You're going to find there are instances where you want to convert this geometry that's been instanced in this array into a single piece of geometry. To do that, you go to the Geometry menu and just click this Convert BPR to Geo, and that will bake that array into a piece of geometry. So these are no longer instance arrays. These are all individual pieces of polygon geometry as a single subtool. The same is true here for the centipede body. If we go to our subtools and select the body, this is an array. We go to Array Mesh. You can see we've still got our Array Mesh here. If I go to Geometry and then click Convert BPR to Geo, now we have converted that to a polygon object. Now that completes our look at the Array Mesh tools. We've seen how we can use simple mechanical shapes to create more complicated and intricate mechanical forms. We've also seen how we can take more organic shapes like this insect body and then use the Array Mesh to create multiple body segments as well as legs. So anytime that you need to construct a more complicated object using a single simple base, you're going to want to use Array Mesh. It's going to allow you to very quickly and easily construct more complex and more interesting forms. So that concludes this lecture. Let's move on to the next chapter.